just a steel town girl. I don't know. I've been singing that all day. We're live. It is 7:13, a little bit late. That's because I was earlier tonight. I was actually working on the installation of a rear spoiler on a 2015 Camaro with my son on his car. So he got one for Christmas, which is cool. And then we were doing all the measurements there. I think I'm going to do a video on that for tomorrow on how to install that. I think that'll be an interesting thing. The most, with all of these things like this, I think that the most important thing, bolting it on, is obviously very easy. I mean, it's held on by, I think, 6 screws. But getting all those screws in the right place, because you have to drill holes in your deck lid, there's a little bit more to it than that. And then also we ran across some problems with because this boiler came from some company in China that some U.S. company was selling. And not everything obviously in China is bad, but you should make sure that you check stuff, because we went to bolt this on, and a couple of the retaining bolts that are molded into however they mold this spoiler, and then it has a carbon fiber like wrap, a cover over, so it looks really cool. It looks amazing. But when they molded some of these, these are basically just nuts. So you have a screw and a nut and bolts it together, hold the thing, and then the nut is captured by the spoiler in the molding process. But when they did it, they molded in some of these nuts that don't have threads on them. So it's not a good situation. And I don't know how to cure that, because if I pry that nut out and put another one in, because of the way that it's shaped, it would stop the nut from turning, but the nut wouldn't be attached to anything. It wouldn't be attached to the spoiler. So the spoiler could just come off, and then the only thing sitting there would be the bolt and the nut. So not a good situation. So we're gonna figure some stuff out. I think we might have enough attachment points that it'll still be okay. I don't think that I can re-tap it without spinning it, because I don't think they're secured very well in whatever that spoiler is made of, fiberglass or whatever that they did. and that oftentimes is a problem with when you're trying to secure that, and you have some sort of steel piece in there, whether it's threaded or whatever. If they just threaded that material, that's not going to be very strong. So you want to have something in there that's, the threaded portion obviously is going to be solid. But then what do you put in there? The best thing to do, and maybe expensive ones are done like this, is if you put, a section, a plate in there that has this on there, it's welded to, or it's part of it, and then you bond that in there, so that you have a lot more surface area holding it when this thing is bonded. So you basically have to tear the whole thing apart for it to come off, if it were to come off from this threaded piece. But obviously that's not the inexpensive way to do it. And then we can't buy spoilers for, I don't know, $100 or $200 or whatever. Then they would all be, thousands of dollars maybe. But it'll look cool. We already had it mocked up on there, and so it'll be cool. The only thing now that is, when you put a rear spoiler on there, it needs a front one. But I told my son that it's going to look cool, and I hope that he doesn't ever want to lower the car. But if you did, with a chin splitter on there or something, it looks awesome. He's never going to be using what that thing would give him if you did. But the problem is that they hit on everything. So it's a good chance that if you're not conscientious of that, and when you're young, you're not, that you'd probably end up tearing it off. But it does look cool when it's sitting there. And so that's going on. But the thumbnail, I want to talk about the thumbnail, because this is something that happens a lot. It certainly does when you're dyno testing. And it's something a lot of times people don't realize. And then when you do point it out, a lot of times they use it as an excuse just to dismiss all of the dyno data. So on this one, this was a test that I did with my Civic Del Sol. It was an SI. It was a factory B16 car. I used it to road race. We won the touring car championship with it. And so it's a good little car. And I also used it to do a ton of testing. I used it for the books that I wrote on Honda stuff, and used it to run Vortex supercharged stuff in there, and turbos and all kinds of things. Excuse me. One of the tests that I did was the TWM stack injection on there, and we put the injectors out in front of the throttle or the in front of the radius entries. And so we wanted to measure, what the gain was from moving the injector. And, you move the injector, you get more charge going, makes more power. But the thing, and that's not what I want to point out. The thing I want to point out on that photo is that if you look closely, there's a big fuel pump attached to the fuel line, the feed line, right before the fuel rail. And the reason that we did that is because that motor or that car had a factory SI pump on it. And because we were no longer making 140-ish horsepower at the tire, now we were making 210 horsepower at the tire with injection on it, we obviously needed more fuel pump. And even more so than on this NA combination, when we started doing Jackson Racing blowers and Vortex superchargers and small turbos and stuff on there, that you definitely need more fuel. But when we had this thing on the dyno, we didn't want to change the fuel pump. So the easy solution, the let's do it right now thing, let's not do it right and put a pump in there. Let's do it right now. And there's a big section of hose. And so we just cut the hose. And I think that was, if I remember right, that was a T-Rex pump. So it probably was an inline 255 pump back in the day with fittings on the ends. So it was a external pump, if you will, kind of an internal pump converted to an external pump. And then it had, and all we had to do is we had barb fittings on it. And then we just cut the hose, put those in there, wired it over to I think we maybe even used alligator clips or whatever, but wired it over directly to the battery. So it was on all the time. Obviously, if you ever heard any of those pumps externally, they're quite loud. And so, but it allowed us to be able to run our stuff on the chassis dyno. And, but then what happens is people look at that and go, oh, well, that's not the same as having it in the tank. The pressure would be different. And you got one pump feeding the other. And they point out all the things that you can say out loud that would be different, but that mean nothing. That ultimately that pump is going to determine, how much fuel flow we have, as long as the other pump feeding that pump, and this is important, at 0 psi, if you got it all the way down that far, it'd be hard, I think, for you to do that where the front pump would be sucking on the other pump, on the feed pump. But you could get it because since one outflows the other one, you could get to that situation. But what happens is, in the way that the reason that this works, and this is one of the things that I want to cover in addition to it being right now rather than being right, is on these fuel pumps, if you put a big pump in front of like the factory pump, you'd think, well, the factory pump is just going to determine how much this thing flows. It's still going to flow the same. It's still going to flow what the factory pump flows, but that's not the case. And the reason for that is we know that the fuel flow capacity of a fuel pump is dictated by a number of things. It's dictated by the voltage supplied to the pump, which in effect increases the speed of the pump, but also the pressure. So the pressure that you're working against, that the pump is having to push against, the higher the pressure system pressure that you're running, the less the pump flows. So if you're having to feed 60 psi, like on a turbo application where you have it at 40 psi and then you're running 20 pounds of boost, the fuel pump doesn't flow very much because it doesn't flow very good at 60 psi, which is what you're asking it to do. But at 40 psi, it flows more. Guess what? At 20 psi, it flows even more. And at 10 psi, it flows even more. And this is what happens when you have the small pump feeding a bigger pump, is that the fuel pressure goes down between the two pumps. It's kind of nice. You would eventually get to the point where that in the tank pump might be the restricting thing. Like I said, you get to the point where the big pump would be trying to draw so much that instead of pressure in between the two pumps, you could get to vacuum. I don't know that I've ever seen that, but that's possible, I guess, theoretically. But that's what happens. And that's why we increase the flow rate of that feed pump so much. And then we can have the bigger pump supply more fuel ultimately to the motor and make more power. And that's how it all happens. But sometimes when we do these things, we have to do it like I did it there. You just have to put it in where it can go and solve the problem that you're trying to solve immediately on the dyno, because dyno time's expensive and you don't want to be building your car and working on things. You want to be testing parts or tuning or whatever you're trying to get done while you're on the dyno. You want to be doing dyno stuff and not engine building stuff. And you'd be surprised how often the engine building stuff happens when people bring things to the dyno. I don't know how many times I've heard at West Tech, oh, I guess this guy's like, it's for chassis dyno stuff, particularly. I mean, almost 100% chassis dyno stuff. Guys bring it in. Yeah, just bring it in for a tune. But when they bring it in, it doesn't run. so this is not a tune. And then you go to start it up and it's got loose rockers, or it's got a clogged fuel pump, or a filter. It's got all kinds of other problems. And then it's not just needs a tune. It's not coming in just for a tune. But I digress. But that's all part of the thing that happens. And like I said, we've done lots of stuff that are just right. Like I've done throttle linkages on the engine dyno that are only designed to work all of the dual throttle body stuff that I've ever run, like when I've done the Super Richie manifolds and stuff. All of those things that I have ever done are all temporary throttle deals. In fact, almost all the throttles that I run are not, you could make it so it's all perfect and it's all billety and has the right length and has the eyelet. I don't do any of that. I call them the Super Richie drive-by wires. I cut a piece of baling wire or stainless wire, safety wire. If we have that, that's more expensive. I like the baling wire because it's cheap, and just make one and it's right forever. And all I have to do is just loop it around and string it over to something that, our Morse cable or whatever that pushes and pulls. You just mount a bracket on there. And then that way I can do it. Like when I did the intake testing on these, we got to run 15 or 20 different intake manifolds. The throttle bodies that they use are all different. The way that the mounts for the linkage, everything's all different. And so you can't have just one that does it. The manifolds themselves are all different. So how you mount the bracket for the throttle is all different. And so you just get one that bolts onto the back of the head and it never changes. And you just change the length of the wire, and that's all, And I make the wire long enough so that all I do is wrap it around the eyelet and then spiral it around. And then I got adjustability, because that's important, especially with adjustable intake manifold. That's very, very important. Let's see what you guys got going on. Eric, Jet, Lunchbox, Zach's Muscle Motors. Right on, Zach's. Richard, didn't think you'd be back on. Yep, that's how we do it, man. We're starting strong. We're starting off strong in 2025. Daryl, this is my brother Daryl. It's my other brother Daryl. Richard, I was just emailing you. We'll see. You're here, man. Just ask the questions. I do see an email there. Let's see what we got going on. Bigger camshaft. I'll have to answer you. I'll answer you on a thing. Near. Nobody. My name is Nobody. Have you seen that movie? What assembly lube and grease do you recommend for a motor that will not be run right away? I recommend assembly lube and not oil for something that won't be run. We've used a lot of good ones. We've used Redline stuff. We've used Lucas stuff. I like depending on how long it's going to be sitting, I like the thicker stuff for when it's not going to be running for a long time. But there's a lot of good ones. Heavy Industries. What's that all about? Hello from Long Island, New York. New York doing it up. Morning and night. That's right. Hello from MD. Australia's in the house. MD, Maryland? That's where I was born. I'm thinking something like that. Danny, what's going on? Happy New Year. Another Long Island guy. There you go. Put you a toggle bolt on there. What kind of spoiler? I don't know what the designation is. It has a wicker bill on it, like a gurney lip, a bolt-on piece on the back that stands straight up because it looks all Trans-Am and stuff. Looks pretty cool. It's got carbon fiber overlay. It's got the carbon look. You'll see. I'll post a picture of it probably tomorrow. Richard, read my mind. Extend my 95 Camaro rear spoiler. You're middle-aged and inattentive. Get the work done. Unlike me, do it. That's the first thing I've worked on with my son. It's pretty cool. Showing him how to tape it and mark off all the things. And I did something this time that I hadn't ever done before, which is why I want to do the video on it. A lot of times when we're marking positions for having to drill something, with something on the other side of it, like we have to sandwich this deal for bolt through the deck lid to bolt the spoiler on, and then with the bolt on the other side. The other thing is this thing doesn't have all the hardware for all of the mounting bolt holes, and it doesn't have any lock washers. It doesn't have any washers at all, like fender, big fender washers. They don't have to be that big, but good size. And then I want to put Loctite on it, at least blue on it. I think. I don't know that I put red on it because, like I said, I don't know how captured those nuts are. But maybe blue. I just don't want it to vibrate and come off. I don't want that spoiler coming off and hitting another car or something. That would be bad. So I want to put all that stuff on there, but it'll be cool. Yeah, you aren't like me where your weekend job takes a year. He's already realizing that we started this. He goes, yeah, we should put that spoiler on. I'm like, yeah, good. It's like right now it's like 5 minutes before it gets dark. That's like his dad. What LS setup would you recommend to do a swap in a square body? Just tell me, Brandon, and I'm going to ignore your thoughts thing because you don't want to ask a question with the word thoughts in it. Just if I don't know if you're new here or whatever, but just don't put the word thoughts down. But you got to give me more information. Just tell me how much power you want to make. We'll start with that. Dan, you got projects? Have you used a 7675 turbo on a 5.3? Considering a slight step up from the GT45, while attempting to retain a quick spool as much as possible. Yeah, but you're not. I don't know that you're going to get that. We're working on some turbos right now working on testing them that should have both more power than the GT45, more absolute power, and better spool. So for guys wanting the in-between area between a 7875 or an S475 and a GT45, and then also it could have better spool. So we're testing a few of them, and that should be happening pretty quickly here. I'm hoping that that's happening in January. Do you think the fuel pressure regulator could handle any overage? Architecture wouldn't matter if AFRs are good. A dyno with a wideband would check that problem, I would expect. A dyno is not going to tell you about the fuel pressure regulator. The fuel pressure regulator at wide open throttle, what you would look at is obviously not the power output or necessarily the air fuel. You would look at the fuel pressure and see what's going on with that. That would tell you whether or not the regulator can bypass all of it. It's hard for a fuel pressure regulator. Like if you put 1,000 horsepower pump or a 1,500 horsepower pump, it's really hard for the fuel pressure regulator, like at idle or part throttle, where the motor's using no fuel, to bypass all of that fuel. That's not an easy thing. If you look at the bypass orifice on most fuel pressure regulators, it's not very big unless you have you got to have a big regulator. Got a question for a friend. I'm asking for a friend. LSA engine has intake headers, pulley, flex fuel, making 600 wheel horsepower, looking for a cam to get it into the 700 horsepower range. Does it have a stock? Not sure if we need to port the blower. Well, a couple things. What fuel are you running? Does it have I don't know what you mean by intake. Do you mean like an air intake going into the blower? Headers, pulley, flex fuel. Okay, flex fuel is good. What size throttle body does it have? What's the boost pressure? And then what cam is in it now? Is it a factory LSA camshaft? Because there's a lot of big step ups you could make for camshafts for compared to the LSA cam. Even the LS9 cam is going to be 50. I was being lazy and didn't want to drop the tank, but now I guess I'll leave it alone. I didn't know that information. We had a moment while we were doing the spoiler, and if you know about what the deck lid looks like on most cars, there is there are hollow areas in there where it's two pieces of steel kind of sandwiched together, but there are voids in there, and so that's where you drop your fastener, and that happened. So I showed my son how to get that out. We had a flexible magnet, and we were able to fish it out there. So that's good learning stuff, because that kind of stuff is going to happen. Your recommendations on a cam for an LT1 Gen 5 going in an old school, looking to keep VVT but delete DOD. So the camshaft that you put in there is going to have to not be very big if you want to keep VVT. If you want to, there are lots of cams that limit VVT, have limiters on it, or just eliminate it. So the bigger the cam you get, the more you're going to just lock it out. But BTR has good LT1 and L83 cams. I'm not ashamed. A lot of my tune issues were weird mechanical or electrical issues. Had plenty of tune issues too. That's not unusual, and that's the problem with guys that are tuning on a laptop. That's why those guys have to know about engine things, because you can't tune around like mechanical or electrical issues. And if you continue to try to do that, you're just really wasting your time. You got a broken spring or a rocker or a dead hole or a bad spark plug or a plug wire or a coil or anything else, and you're like, this thing's not responding to my tune. Yeah, because one of the cylinders isn't working. And if you have the sensor on that side, you have a series of problems. If you have the sensor on the other side, like if you're just doing one side or the other, if you have the sensor on the other side, that sensor is operating correctly, and it's just all kinds of issues. Coat hanger, yeah, coat hanger works if you can see where it is. Fish around. I was hoping with the flexible, or it wasn't flexible, it wasn't a bendy one, it was just an extension one. I was hoping I could just use it on the outside and then run the bolt up, but it wasn't successful at that. We do need a pull, that's right. Have you used Ace's EFI? I have not. Nobody was an awesome movie, definitely. And Beekeeper. We talked about that earlier today. Hi, from the short island of New Zealand. It's the short one. Are there dinosaurs there? Happy New Year's. Sinister, I have Aces on my 5.3. It works awesome. See, there you go. That's why we come here, man. Nobody's hooking you up. Nobody's hooking you up. Your videos are great. Thanks for the videos. Thanks for the kind words, David. If I port my 243s, will it make more power everywhere or just on the top? The gains will be more on the top, not because the heads aren't working, but because the heads are working. The way that an internal combustion engine works is that you get greater gains when you improve the flow in the areas where the motor needs more flow. So if it's making 300 horsepower down low and the heads will support 400 horsepower, it's like, I got enough. And if you port them and now they support 500 down low, it doesn't matter, because you already had enough to begin with. But where they start taking advantage of it is in areas where they start needing that extra flow. Is it like one of the Dustbusters looking spoilers? I could send, if you want to send me an email, I could send you a picture, Dan. Trans-Amy. What are the word? Trans-Amy. Is that of or like Trans Am-esque? One of the worst mechanical issues was that they changed TPI throttle bodies, and the IAC passageways are different. Uh-oh. Does it have DRS like Formula One cars? I don't think this one has that. Although I am surprised at how powerful that the V6 is. It's pretty sporty. Do you have any resources for muscle car aerodynamics, coefficient of drag, things like that for running a Silver State? I don't. And I honestly wouldn't go about it that way. I would do more of a search for trying to find top speeds of things, particularly if they had known horsepower levels, and just base it off of that. Because if you have that data point, the aero stuff is not going to help you nearly as much as a very simple equation. If you want to increase the speed of your car, you have to a 25% increase in speed requires 100% increase in power. So that's a really simple formula for you to determine how much more power you're going to need to go fast. And actually, even in the Silver State, just like Bonneville, making the power is not hard. That's pretty easy. getting it to last for 90 miles at wide open throttle is hard. And having everything else be right for that. Blue Loctite comes in red containers. Just a heads up. Yeah, we're familiar. But ours doesn't come in red containers. Ours came in blue. The newer stuff did. But all of them used to come in red. I've officially bolted the front 2 subframe bolts in place. Just got to do the rear now. It involves welding in crush tubes and drilling new holes in the chassis rails. That's cool, though. Can you drill into the bolt and put a cotter pin in it for the spoiler so that the nut won't back out? Can I drill into the bolt and put a cotter pin in for the spoiler so that the nut won't back out? I'm not seeing where the cotter pin will hold anything. Listing more stuff on eBay. Exciting trying to fund projects. Ollie trying to fund low to no budget projects and running out of money. Smell the blue Loctite is good. 8.5 out of 10. I would agree that is good. And the taste is excellent. I've heard. He's asking for a friend. Scrolling. Man. Oh, here we go. Try Honda. They have a program that does all that stuff. Online, CD, frontal area. Richard, in your truck Norris cam test, what was the timing at peak horsepower on the NA one? 29 degrees at the horsepower peak. Do modular 5.4 headers bolt on backwards? Since I've done the chassis upgrade, I have zero excuses to weld metal pipes for a turbo. I don't remember. It's been a while since I ran. And is it a 5.4 valve or 5.42 valve? And the answer is I don't know on either one of those. I don't know if I don't remember if those bolt holes are symmetrical or not. Hopefully, Happy New Year, Smith Boys Machine. Hopefully, we can get our motors running before 2026. Happy Old Year. Welcome New Year. Yep. 2025. We're starting out good. Great, man. Looks like I'll put a pause on the turbo purchase until that data is gathered. Now for oils, what do you run on the motors, for example? On the junkyard stuff, we run whatever's on sale. So I run the stuff that's $23 or $22 or $23 for 5 quarts. Usually a 530 on an LS. You inspired me to build a 408. I built it identical to yours, but with more compression. Going to get it on the Fox body. It's taken 2 years. That'll be fun in a Fox body. Elsewhere, but Honda has access to most of the coast down calculations to dial in the exact values. They have data on their own runs. I think the throttle body is stock. Cam's definitely stock, running 93 or 85. I was told 615 wheel horsepower on 85, but I haven't seen a dyno sheet. Try by wire. What is that on? Let's see. Oh, that's on the LSA. The throttle body is stock. Cam is definitely stock. Okay. E85 is way better, which should make a lot more power because it'll allow you to have more timing. A bigger throttle body and a ported inlet are definitely good. I was told 650 wheel horsepower on 85, but I haven't seen the dyno sheet. Okay. Cold air intake into the stock throttle body. Great to see you. Awarded tech education chat people enthusiasts. Not sure what size pulley or how much boost. Can find out. Does it have a boost gauge on it? helpful for the younger generation. When using turbo, what timing amount are you looking for? Small block 302, F303? Are you setting at idle? For us, when we're running on the engine dyno, we just give it enough timing so it will idle. I don't really care about that. But idle timing for a typical 5-liter 302, a fuel injected one, we would set initial around 10, but once it started, it could be higher than that. Get your low buck truck cam last week, thanks. Is it the same as a Truck Norris? It makes the same kind of power. Finally got my LS swap 911. Oh, nice. Running. You got ITBs on it? Oh, that would be awesome. That'd make it sound all like a Porsche. You should get a Porsche Motorsport sticker and put it on that motor. Happy New Year, Jimmy. Seems like every time I turn on YouTube, you're doing a live feed. We're trying to. We're taking over. How well would twin 7875s work on a 540 big Chevy? Would the T4 housings be too restrictive? No, not with two of them. Those would support. I mean, are you trying to make 2,000 horsepower? Really looking for fuel economy and torque. Trying to find a square body wrecker to drag old cars I came across for projects. Is a boom style with a flatbed. I'm looking at higher than stock flow pump. Flow is rated at 4 bar. Injectors are rated at 3 bar. Should the system be regulated down to 3 bar or run the injectors at 4 bar? What pump do you have? Is it a Hellcat pump? The injectors need to be run. You need to put the injectors at the fuel pressure that's high enough for the flow rate for the injector that's necessary for the power level. And then you have to have a pump that will keep up. Or you put bigger injectors in and then you could turn the fuel pressure down and then make life easier on the pump. Thousand horsepower maximum setup. Will a single 525 feed that? Figure a 6-speed will allow for some low gearing. Lunchbox wants to know what are the limitations of the ACES fuel injection system. Jake, that specific stuff that you're asking about is going to be hard to find. But quite honestly, I think you're worried about something that you shouldn't be worried about for the Silver State. Would you consider a test for various EFI systems in an LS? In theory, they make the same amount of power across the board, but I'd be curious to see how you compare their user friendliness. That would be all subjective, because the user friendliness would be, is it a brand new system that I've never used? And so I'd have to evaluate it versus things that I've already used. But if they all provide the same airfield and the same timing, they definitely all provide the same power. Two Ataras, they aren't much bigger than 425 after they hatch, but when 116 years old and fully grown, they're almost 21 inches long. What is that about? I know what a Tuatara is. That's what they're saying created Godzilla. That's where Godzilla came from. At least that's the lizard that they always show at the beginning of the Godzilla movies. I've been telling people for ages they've been sleeping on V6s. Everybody acts like they're too good for it. Yes, I would have any issues with the water pump or alternator running at 6% overdriven. My 6.4 Hemis, everyone else available from ATS, 15% or more underdriven. Overcoming aerodynamic force is a real drag. There are a bunch of flavors of Loctite. Red is high temp, blue, red, green, external orange. Yep. Yeah, and then you have sleeve compound and all kinds of stuff. Lunchbox, there are options for bigger cams, bigger injectors, and force induction, all self-tune, self-learning. I don't know the max power, but I'm guessing 600 to 800 on self-learning. I haven't come up with a poll tonight. I might, though. 1,000 plus horsepower, I'd recommend a Fuel Tech or a Holly. First 2025 thing for me is hopefully getting the Vortex sensor in the crank bracket set up and not ground down like the old one. Uh-oh. Richard has a unique way of using spark plugs in big bang engines. But don't I use them just like everybody else does? Okay, here's your poll. Will gas prices go down in 2025? Scrolling. I have Fuel Tech on my MR2. It's really easy to tune, has great customer service. I think all of them get to be easy for people once you have experience with them. I thought that the Holly was fairly user-friendly. I'm excited about trying the Haltech one now and seeing if that's going to be the same. If you ran the 4.8, 5.3 for long, would you still use 530? I would, yeah. I don't know if you're talking about if I ran it long, if I ran it under boost for a long time, I would use a better synthetic oil probably, and maybe go with something a little bit higher than that, maybe a 540. Do the different LS head castings have different max lifts that they can support? You mean is there a physical interference problem? Is that what you're asking, or are you asking from a flow standpoint? Does anybody know how this in-cabin Turbo Smart boost controller is supposed to mount? Has anybody mounted one of those? Winston needs a quick inspiration on how to get that done. Oh, speaking of inspiration, my inspiration for how the turbo is set up would be like a Cosworth DFX Indy car. Intercooled though, 5.4, 4-valve, CCAS, 204. Okay, all that's good. At what point does the build start to need short travel hydraulic lifters? When you're running lots of RPM. 302 is going to be blow through setup. However, we melted pistons down 25 psi and hypertex. Total timing 35 degrees. Yeah, you didn't melt them down because you had a piston problem there. Your LS cam good with vacuum brakes? Yes. The low buck truck camshaft is. Do you have experience with FMUs? Yeah, lots and lots of them. I want to run a turbo on my Civic. Plan on locking timing low until I get a 6 BTM. Planning on gapping rings and running no tune. I think I keep it alive. Yeah, I would run it on low boost. We've run boost on Civic motors a lot with FMUs, and they work. You just have to get the right ratio FMU, and then also you have to get the right kind of pump that supports that very high fuel pressure. Does your low truck camshaft have smaller than base circle and stock? No, it's very close to stock. I've been told we should set down around 20 total and keep boost low. Does BTR have cams for 2.3 liter Rangers? No. Using FMU back when I was a kid messing with turbo Dodge stuff. I have a D16 and plan on trying the OBD1 PCM that can be tuned. Yeah, can't you get Chrome or one of those to? That stuff might. Excuse me. That stuff might even be free. Dark Blaze, the New Year was good. What spark plugs do you like for LS around 15 to 20 pounds? We ran Denso Iridiums in the Big Bang motors, I think. We ran IQ 31s. The old stagger rocker arm ratio, does it make a difference? On what? You got give me more information than that. FMU is so old school, but just modded AFRs and don't let it go leaner than 12. On FMUs, my experience with them, like we just ran one relatively recently when we ran the Kenny Bell on there, because that's what the kits came with, and it worked fantastic. It had a really, really good air fuel curve on the supercharged 302 that we ran it on. And it also had, if you look at the fuel pressure, it had very high fuel pressure initially, and then the fuel pressure started falling off because the pump that was in there, which I probably was a stock pump or a Cobra pump, was not able to keep up. But the resulting amount of fuel flow gave us the right air fuel that was like in the 11s, and it worked out really good. Having fun with my 2-liter Ecotech. Richard could do a whole live feed on FMUs. Yeah, probably so. They still work. In fact, I'm going to use one on the Metro the next time we run it. I want to do a AMR 500 versus turbo on the Metro. Purchase a TBSS intake for an LM7. It didn't come with a throttle body. Looking to turbo. What size throttle body do you recommend? I would get the throttle body that matches the inlet of the intake manifold. So in that case, it's like a 90. And I don't know if you're running a manual one or you want to run it, or if your computer set it for drive-by-wire. Poll question is your, let's see. Is your New Year's resolution to get your project running? Don't have the pump yet, but it's a Holley drop-in sending unit for my stock tank. They claim rated at 1200 horsepower EFI, but it doesn't specify NA or boost. It would specify boost if it was that. Why bother with an FMU when there's a Mega Squirt? Because an FMU probably costs a tenth of what a Mega Squirt costs, right? No politics. Would 91 to 93 pump would be on 91 to 93 pump gas? Drive day mine actually runs until I buy the valve train bits to swap the head and install the camshaft. We can't have expired Loctite on the shop floor here at work, so take all of the expired stuff and put it into the bottles that aren't expired. Super genius move. Loctite's not cheap, man. All right, Lunchbox, we'll see you. What's research would you recommend for learning HP tuners? Go to, what's the tuner school? The Tuner Academy or whatever? Just fully rebuilt my LC9. Anyone researching the Cybertruck in Las Vegas today? What accessory drive kit would be best to keep everything close as possible to the engine? Probably the LS4 stuff, I'm thinking. Learn HP Academy, yeah, YouTube videos and lots of internet research. It's more than one thing. There's not going to be a short answer to learning. You got to go find all kinds of stuff. But the HP Academy stuff I think is good. You play with a 2-liter turbo GM engine in the Cadillac. I have not. Mechanical interface on stock LS heads. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that question is. B&R, they had factory short travel lifters in the Pontiacs? Why would you need a short travel lifter to turn 6,600 RPM? All of the, or at least none of the Chevys had that for that RPM. Also looked at Lingenfelter reported LS3 heads. What's your take on an LM7 5.3 de-stroked with a 5.8 cranking rods? That's just, I mean, a 4.8. That's just a 4.8. A 4.8 and a 5.3 use the same block. The 4.8 just has a different crank and rods. So that's just a 4.8. Will your 50-pound injectors work on my 98 LS1? I only saw a brief report on it, trying to avoid the news and not get mad. Yeah, the stuff is terrible that happened in where is that in is it New Orleans? Scrolling. People on Facebook say I'll bend rods with a small turbo on my D16. Should I run a small turbo or get a cam? I want a quick spool. Don't plan on seeing high RPM. I don't think you'll have a turbo that's so small that you're going to have, peak boost at 2000 RPM. I don't think you're going to put that kind of turbo on there on the D16. You're going to have boost that's going to come on like at 3000 RPM or whatever. As long as you have timing pulled away and you have enough fuel, you'll be fine. I've run a lot of D series with turbos on them and blowers and all kinds of stuff. Have you ever tested a vintage Corvette fuel injection 327? Yes, I did. I ran it, compared it to the carbureted version of that same motor. That's an L84, and the other one was an L76, the carbureted one. It's a 365 horse versus a 375 horse version. What's your recommendation for a vacuum pump for an 08 Silverado? I'm only able to pull 14.5 inches, so the truck is setting a service brake system. I don't know. Does anybody know about that for a vacuum pump? I'll stay with an FMU. I'd be sure to have a wideband O2. Expect a lot of melted parts where people are not monitoring air fuels or not pulling timing. I know a lot of guys back in the day would just bolt it on and go, okay, I've seen lots of guys put turbos, eBay turbo stuff on Hondas and just bolt the turbo on and then go. Like, how long before it blew up? Oh, almost immediately. Yeah, because you have lots of airflow and you don't have any fuel and you still have stock timing. So you have like the worst of everything. For an ultimate SUV sleeper, what would you choose? Looking into a Saturn Vue. They have a Honda J Series. Yep. Yeah, just boost on a J Series would be good. I don't know how the drivetrains are in those, though. How much power would you estimate my engine will make? 8-to-1, 454. 214 cam, 871 blower. I don't know what 10% under gets that. Like I'd need to know what the boost level is, but that's a pretty mild motor. And then I don't know what the boost level is. Get one of the vacuum pumps off of the Suburbans, mounts right to the brake booster. Did they come from the factory that way, Dan? Cameron stock cam, small turbos fine. Stave VTEC on YouTube has a great deal on small Borgs. I'm trying to buy one for my Y8. Speaking on FMU and prices, reminds me of days trying to get my Kenny Bell boosted pump. The boosted pumps work good. I've used those a lot. We've done lots of even long-term durability testing on those, on pumps with those. 4.8 with 5.7 pistons. So are you doing a 4.8 block? I don't know what the 4.8 IRR in with 5.7 pistons. I don't know what you're doing there. I don't think a 245 at 50 cam is going to work unless you have valve release. Richard has down sheets of stock 4.8s and 5.3s. Yeah, those are up. And a 6.0 and a 6.2. High Performance Academy and Tuning School. I have an LNF E-Tech. It's very reliable. Mine is fully mod built, but you need the sandcast block if you want to run over 20 pounds. Ran a lot more than 20 pounds on a stock block. There's a guy on YouTube named Goat Rope. Yeah, Goat Rope is good. I like that guy. He's teaching a lot more about HV tuners. I keep forgetting about him. Any more plans for the Pontiac Trophy 4-cylinder? Yeah, the plan is to run it now that it's rebuilt. Yeah, but past 500 horsepower, you do want that Regal turbo block. Just 1969, 1970 Ram R4s. On the lifters had that? Scrolling. We were so lucky years ago when our TV prices, brake clean, spark plugs were so cheap and disposable. I've run 30 psi, but it was not dependable. I've got all the info from Doug McMillan. Oh, from Honda. Calculations are easy on 10 figures. At what point does a lift on the camshaft become void? I don't know what you mean. Where does lift not make a difference? On what cylinder head and what combination and all that? We have an 09 HHR on 23 pounds on an LNF and bolt-ons. They went really fast with one of those out at Bonneville. I had one that was 800 or something. And then in drag racing, they made crazy power with those. That's Pontiac's highest RPM engine other than the 303 and the 400. Can't wait to turbo my D16Y. Happy New Year, Global. Dress weight of car with driver in pounds. Why would the weight affect speed? Dead on horsepower rating of the 375 Fuelie. It was close. It made a little bit more than the carbureted one did, but it had trouble keeping up in the fueling. It would want to drain the fuel reservoir because the fuel reservoir that's in that fuel injection was the size of one side of a carburetor. What was the best gas station to get E85? For me, it's the closest one. The peak head flow 0.85 is optimal valve lift, but I could see that as a wives' tale too. In 2025, I think I'm selling the GT350 and buying a C7 Corvette. All right. Amazon E85 tester and pocket change to check. Never test the 85. Don't even care. Can you recommend injector size for a stock 5.3 with a truck Norris cam? Yeah, we have at richardholdenerperformance.com, we have injectors that a lot of guys have been using. They're 52 pounders, and that's more than big enough for anything that you would do. You definitely are going to need if you're going to get a truck Norris cam, or if you already have it, you're going to need bigger injectors. And those injectors that we have on the channel, we also have pumps available. That way you can supply enough fuel. You're going to have to do a tune when you put a camshaft in, whether it's that one or the low buck truck camshaft that we have. You're going to have to do a tune on it. So put big enough injectors in it. We normally recommend guys go even bigger than that. We sold more of those 52s than we have of the bigger ones. But I recommend guys doing bigger ones just for if later on they're ever going to put a boost on the thing. GT350 is good, but hard not to love a C7. Your junkyard 6-liter turbo test, what were you seeing for horsepower at 15 pounds of boost? We're seeing double the NA power output. Aiming for, so whatever the NA power output that you're starting with, depending on whether it's a stock motor or a cammed one or one that has heads and intake manifold like we had on our Big Bang motors. That lot tells you exactly how much flywheel horsepower, net horsepower is required for a needed top speed on asphalt surface. Okay. I don't know why weight would be one of those factors. What drop-in forged piston would you recommend for my 6-liter to reliably support 1,000 wheel horsepower? I would go get something from Summit if they have it available. There's lots of good things out there. The Bullet series stuff from CP and Carrillo. The K1 stuff is all good. The Wiseco stuff is good. The guys from Race Tech have really good stuff. You want to have a strength issue from any of those pistons at 1,000 wheel horsepower. You probably won't have a problem with stock stuff at 1,000 wheel horsepower if you have ring gap and you have the tune correct. But the forged stuff will be better and stronger over the long haul. But Summit has their Pro LS stuff will work fine at that power level. Some of the Suburbans came with vacuum pumps because of the low manifold vacuum. Why did the Suburbans have low manifold vacuum with such small cams and stuff in them? Dyno, a forklift. That would be good. You should just chassis dyno that one. Prices and customer service have gone downhill. Our local shops have been getting better prices. I'm paying for shipping at Rock Auto. Have you ever thought about making your own intake? Yes, constantly. I've made a lot of one-offs, but not any production ones. Do you use Honda Odyssey H10 transmission as far as I'm aware, at least for the 07s? Is there a reason I shouldn't run ITW turbo on my D16? Don't want a fab exhaust. I was thinking about WRX turbo, so I'm ready to upgrade one day when there's a great turbo aftermarket. There's only a bajillion turbos available for a D16. If you go online, there's literally hundreds and hundreds for you to choose from. When can we get Audi 1.8T content? That's probably not going to happen. I have done chassis dyno testing on a Volkswagen 1.8T Golf long ago, and we did some testing with that on different stages of stuff, and it worked good. He did a turbo upgrade and stuff, and intercooler upgrade and tuning on it. I'm making an intake out of an old aluminum drive shaft my boss was throwing away. There you go. Are you using that as the plenum? Advanced Auto Parts in Maryland's going out of business. Just got some fluids and filters. My LNF Ecotech with dual scroll stock turbo will go from idle to 25 pounds in 0.002 seconds. How do you even measure that small of a time period? Considering a GT4 iron head on a turbo attach, will the additional lift keep adding value, or will the turbo max the head out? I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. Is the additional lift from the camshaft changing the NA power? You could keep adding boost from the turbo and it will keep making power at higher boosts, irrespective of the lift. I don't know why you're attaching the lift to that. And is the lift adding NA power? If it's not changing the NA power, then you probably are not going to change the boosted power. Although maybe you get up to a point where it's adding boosted power at some point, but I don't know where that would be. We just have ZZP bolt-ons and tune. The 1.8 is being slept on. It's not an Audi 1.8. It's a Volkswagen 1.8. There's been endless tuning and stuff on those. They make good power, but they do what every other one does too. They make a given amount of NA power, and then you put a turbo on it, and then the turbo multiplies that NA power, and then you could turn the boost up a lot because it's a factory turbo motor. And then if you want more, you do a ported head and you do cam. So it does the stuff that all other motors do. Let's meet up and ride our dirt bikes in this parking lot. Sold my Fox body yesterday. What year was it, Daniel? If you like the 5-valve 1.8T, go check out Stavtex MR2. Did you go out to the races today? Richard, any experience with mechanical distributor conversions on LS engines? I'm intrigued by the ability to keep all of my older electronics on board of my bracket car. No, I've never tried that. I don't ever see a reason. I don't even understand why that was ever even made. I don't understand a reason why somebody would want a distributor on that motor. I don't understand that with the ability to just plug in the MSD ignition controller and run the factory sensors and then run the coil, all of the coils. I don't know why you would get rid of all of that other stuff and then go to a distributor, unless you wanted to put a points distributor on there so that in case you ever had an EMP thing happen. Rolling resistance, Richard, goes up with weight. You're saying the weight has an effect on top speed? Every 100 pounds should net you one off of your ET. Yeah, I would. For acceleration, I agree with that. Suburbans are heavier and you're in the throttle more. Probably low vacuum because of DOD and trying to reduce pumping losses. Okay. The RB31 turbo would be fun. Those are small. Okay, Dean, I'll take your word for it. Nobody at Bonneville worries about weight. It's the main plenum. Keep the GT350, man. It's an icon. There you go. What would the idle quality be like on your low buck truck cam with a 402 with ported heads? It'd have, if you put it in a motor that's that big, the idle vacuum would go way up. RHB 52s would take off of pros were tiny. Can't imagine a 31. Yeah, the one that was on the, to give you an idea, the one that's on the 1 liter sprint engine is designed to feed a motor that only makes 70 horsepower under boost. First tunnel rams were made by taking the tops off of a small block Chevy Fuelie manifold and adding a plenum. Warren Johnson was doing that in the 70s. Okay. I remember seeing one of those with dual throttle bodies on top of it. What external pump would work for a cammed LS2 going in my 240? They make external versions of the 255s all the way up to the 525s. I would imagine any of those would work if it's just a stock LS2. Have you done any testing with different style coil packs like factory LS coils versus smart coils? No, I haven't. And there's a reason that I haven't is because we've run factory LS3 coils on the big bang motors at 1500 horsepower and don't have any problems with coils. So I can tell you that if you have a factory coil like that LS3 coil, I haven't tried that the same thing on the truck ones, but on that LS3 coil, if you can adjust the plug gap and you can adjust the dwell like we can with the Holly, you don't have a coil problem. What style of intake manifold would you follow in your design? I don't know what you mean by what would I follow. Low nitrous can help the turbo spool faster. The intake that I would make would be dependent upon what I was trying to achieve. If I was wanting to run a carbureted one, I would make a carbureted style manifold. If I was wanting to run an EFI, I would make an EFI one. I like making them adjustable just because I think it helps with testing. I am looking at it wrong. Maybe a better way to look at it would be comparing an F303 versus an E303. Would the F303 allow more horsepower to be made, or would it have better boost response? Whichever one of those cams, well, you're changing more than just lift on those cams. But whichever one of those cams made more low speed power, it would have better boost response. And that's true of any cam, of any two cams. Zoo truck. We can all calm down now here that you've made it. Racer, what are we data logging? Oh, you data logged it? And your sample rate is enough to go to the third decimal point? I can't figure out how to make someone's name bold like you did with mine using an Android. I read at a point the R18s run with the throttle body open. How they modulate power is foggy thinking, cam timing. BMW did that. They modulate it with lift. My Briggs vertical to horizontal engine conversion is done. I noticed while editing a video that I put the cam in different than it was. It was off by one tooth. Tailrams were around in the late 50s in the Chrysler engines, then Pontiac in the 63 421 HD drag car. I sent you a message about cams and comments you made on the last live feed. Did I answer it? I usually try to answer all the questions. Try to answer every comment. Scrolling. Asking for a friend. Going forward. 64 Ranchero. Would you rather marry a late model F-150 or Mustang chassis to the body? Is the chassis not good on the car? Is it all rusted out or something? I think I would pick a Mustang chassis because I would like it to be more of a cool, like lowered handling kind of thing rather than a lifted trucky kind of thing. That's right. I said trucky. Why do engine 7/8 headers make more power on Gen 4 6 liters than engine 7/8 are bigger than the exhaust port? Is there a test where engine 7/8 headers made more power? I don't see a big difference between that and engine 3/4. And the header's not making power because it flows or because it's bigger size or smaller size than the port. Because there are things happening in the header that have nothing to do with that. If that answers your question. There's scavenging waves that are happening that are going backwards that are actually drawing intake in. %, under on the 454 is supposed to make 8 pounds. Why does BTR offer 2 different locator thicknesses in their 660 kit? Because it depends on how much lift your camshaft has. You don't need a 660 lift spring on a 600 lift cam. You actually want the thing to be closer to coil bind. More spring is not good. So if you can shim that up and not have all of that extra spring, because the more spring that you have away from coil bind, it allows the spring to wiggle around, and you don't want that. Richard, is there any benefit to maintaining factory VVT on a Gen 4 LS versus removing it? Yeah, there probably is. There probably is. On a stock cam, there definitely is. So keep that and don't just run a fixed stock cam. Probably the VVT has a bigger average power production. I just don't know what the specs are on the VVT cam. So you're changing two things there. If you're talking about aftermarket cams, when you do that, you're not going to be able to have big swings in VVT because you just don't have the available piston to valve clearance in order to do that. So that's why on all the VVT stuff, even on VVT cams, you get to a certain point where they limit the amount that you can swing that. and then they eliminate it altogether. So as you go to a bigger cam that's going to make more power, you don't also get VVT unless you have big reliefs in the pistons. My friend has not bought the subframe connectors yet. Do you still talk to the guy that got the Nova? I haven't spoke with him in a while, but I'm going to call him tomorrow. Any opinion on a 96 F-150 351 Windsor turbo buildup? What do you mean? Are you asking what my thoughts are? You got to be more specific. I think it's a good idea. Twin turbo anything is the answer is yes. Have you ever heard anyone make unequal length headers for anything LS? Yeah, almost every header that I've ever tested is unequal length. I heard a Lexus V8 with unequal length headers and it sounded awesome. And you think that that's because that they were unequal length? You think that that's what did it? I don't know. I don't know if any of the headers that we have at Westech, other than possibly the sprint car ones that they just did, I don't know that any of them are equal length. I know that the Hooker ones that we run, the swap headers, those are not equal length. I don't think that the American Racing ones were. I don't think that the QTP ones were. I don't think that any of them were. I think that when you're having to put it in a specific chassis, that becomes harder and harder. And honestly, I don't know that. I think that you're nitpicking if you're trying to do that. You answered my question here, but not on Facebook Messenger. It was kind of a long question. In your opinion, gear ratio for a Telegram 400 small block 1,600 pound Bantam Roadster on the street now is 331s. It's way too high. Is that too tall of a gear? And then what transmission is this thing? And what is the RPM and all that? I need more information there. Mustangs are pony cars. Cougars are also pony cars. Because isn't a Cougar on a Mustang chassis anyway? Any chance of you doing LSVVT testing? Not. I could do that at BTR, maybe. I mean, unequal length, like colliding the pulses like Subaru do. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you think that the difference between those two things that we're talking about would be. Still waiting for someone to make the worst unequal length header possible, where each pulse exit the collector all at the same time. Subaru guys swear by unequal length headers. Do they think that only their motor does that? Would you recommend to build a Lincoln 460 with force induction wise? Friend is getting rid of his F250. So do you have a Lincoln 460 and you're putting it in a Ford F250? Is that what you're doing? And there's lots of stuff that you could put on that. I mean, you could turbo it, put blowers on it, I guess. I was going to say for the Subaru 4-cylinder, unequal length headers are a huge difference in sound. On a Cougar before they did the early 70s redesign with the toilet seat front grille. Yes, too tall. Turbo 400 RPM between 3,000 and 4,000. And it's Rich. This is not something you're driving on the freeway, right? If you're driving it around a lot and you care about drivability, 373s. Otherwise, do a 4 Series gear in it. How would an LS1 intake work on an LS2? It would be fine. It doesn't have as big of an opening. And I would pick an LS6 over both of those. I have a 66 GTO with a 400, but I'm thinking about putting a 4-inch stroke in it and making it a 434. More torque. What are my chances of beating an 89 or 90 LT1 Corvette with my K24 Accord? It's stock, but I'm wondering how much spray to beat them. Well, do you have any draggy or any acceleration runs or any data on what that Accord runs? And is it an automatic or is it a stick? And how good is your driving? You saw cougars at the mall. Did you talk to any of them, Dan? Out in the wild? Car farm, Yuri. I just want to say I'm huge. I think 434-inch Pontiac with twin 72s would be awesome. Dynamic results say truck intake on everything. Cut the hood open. Oh, dyno results. Yeah, I was gonna say dynamic. Or what are you doing? Are you doing crank compression stuff or something? No freeway driving, car shows. Yeah, put 410s in it. Maybe one day you'll see more engine masters. They're not making the show anymore unless they redo it on some other platform. Way to go, Ben. Is there a way to tell on the outside of an LS1 has an LS1 or LS6 intake manifold? I have an 03 Holden, not sure which. Your 03 should be an LS6 intake manifold. Have you all heard the 66389 is a weak motor and the 7400 is stronger? Not power protection, but strength of parts. Is the 400 block stronger? Where are our Pontiac guys that will know that? The best sounding V8 I've ever heard was Tanner Faust's Drift Taxi. 8-into-1 equal length header. Those 8-in-1s do sound cool. There's been a couple of off-road like sand cars at West Tech that have that exhaust. Oh, the Cougar was on a Falcon Comet 4-door chassis. Okay. Is the Cougar that much longer than a Mustang? My car's manual and LT1 Corvette is stock. I made a video of my car. I'm hoping 100 will take the vet. And use it as early as you can so that you get a lot of average power production. I don't know what K24 you have. Is it like a 160 horse version or is it a 200 horse version? Build a 2.8 out of an S10 and do a dyno or even a 3.4 out of a 90s Camaro. What do you mean build it? Where are we going to find heads and cams and intakes for that kind of thing? 488s. There you go. That will also work. Just got a draggy, best fun ever without going to the track. My stock 4.8 Silverado is doing 16.4s. Nice. Cougar is a family car. Richard, do you have any hot rods? I'm original owner 88 5-liter Mustang, 95 Omni GLH with an S swap, and a 71 240Z, and a stock Silverado 2002, the best year before they went to the drive-by-wire. No drive-by-wire stuff, man. Cannot wait to 3-inch downpipe on the twin turbo 302. We upgraded the turbos and exhaust along with updating the gears. 410s or 327s for trap speed. Are you running into an RPM problem in top gear when you're running at the drag strip in that? Intake cam and injectors, I'm not sure if stock will do. You're not going to be able to use stock injectors in anything that has turbos on them. This car is built LS7 that made 1,000 wheel horsepower. People would show up once in a while at super late models with 8-to-1 headers. I think they look good and they sound good. Yeah, I don't know about. I've never seen any power tests on them. Richard, do factory exhaust manifolds have an advantage on the big block Chevy? Have an advantage over what? In 95, the F-250 came with a 460. I know, but you had mentioned, I thought you had mentioned a Lincoln 460. So I didn't know if this was an early 460 that you were putting in there, but I know that the trucks had 460s in them. They had the later EFI stuff. Mustang was a 108 wheelbase and the Cougar was a 111. Okay. Draggy might be a good seller for the website. I agree. I like those. I'm amazed at Jimmy's stuff that he did on his NSX, which that NSX is super cool. Do you think BTR are making the best street cams out there? I don't look at cams that way, and I don't look at manufacturers that way. I look at cams in a way that help solve a need for a particular person for a particular application. And quite honestly, I think that there are lots and lots of camshafts that will solve those. You could buy lots of different cams from lots of different people that will do the same thing for you. BTR makes good stuff. I think that their stuff is excellent. Drive-by-wire, as long as it has been around, I believe can be adjusted via HP tuners. Galbank's pedestal monster. Who still plays with GM 2.8, 3.4 V6s nowadays? I did a turbo for one of those for a 3100. Neil, stock exhaust manifolds never do better than header. Well, never. That on a big block Chevy, I've never seen stock exhaust manifolds come anywhere near the power output of headers. Would 7 pounds of boost make power on a 400 motor, 400 horsepower motor? Yes. 7 pounds of boost will make power on any motor. About 50%. $85 fuel flow is different by 30%. Yeah, 25 to 30%. 600 horsepower is easy. You should put 80s in it. What would make a great 6-liter package to get the most NA horsepower? I have 6-liter videos up. In fact, the most popular video that I have up that's got over 1 million views now is basically 10 different packages of 6-liter stuff. So just go there and you can pick what kind of power you want. Let's say you are having a spirited drive on a great back road. What's on the playlist? I don't listen to the music. In fact, I don't even have a radio in my truck. So I don't listen to that while I'm driving. And I don't listen to it while I'm driving. Like if I'm on a track or whatever, I don't listen to music while I'm doing that. I like to hear what's going on with the motor and the traction and all that. I don't really believe so. However, last run into the engine, not loading the car would not make boost until the top of second. I'm hoping a swap will allow the engine to load down. Bobby, what's going on? I never broke a stock Pontiac V8 cast steel rod. $8.1 has little to no aftermarket support. Radar is about the only company that has stuff. Red Bull, thank you for showing up. Weak point of the 2 point is the bottom end. So many long phone calls on the drives to and from West Tech. That's right. That's what I do. Car Firm knows that. Got to take care of my stuff. Sometimes I will listen to YouTube stuff on West Tech. That's not spirited driving though. That's just 70 miles an hour cruise control. Just go for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And on that note, it is time to go. And close our poll at 72, 73%, saying that they're, I guess, got their fingers crossed that they hope prices will go down. And on that note, I will see you guys all tomorrow.